you were talking about the possibilities and how you doubled or tripled the amount of revenue for a project that you had actually created yourself and came down the pipe. So what was the outcome?
Well, the outcome was that first of all, we discovered properties that we had that we didn't realize we had. Second of all, we discovered properties that other people were using that belonged to the city that we weren't getting
Wow.
any income on.
Wow.
People had sort of migrated their businesses onto ours, into our property, and we weren't doing anything about it.
Wow.
So we either should make them not use it, or we should charge them for it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I discovered was there were some places that had billboards on them.
That they already had billboards.
That they already had billboards on,
Mm-hmm.
and that it appeared we hadn't been paid for 15 years on the billboards.
So the city should have actually been thanking you. You discovered these things.
Well, the city actually did thank me through that and other things that I approached in the same way, strategically and systematically, saying, what's the real question here? What are we really trying to accomplish, and how can we best do that? Through that, I actually got promoted.
Okay.
I was recognized for the work I was doing by the Public Works Director, and I was promoted to a position that the card I got read Special Programs Manager.
Okay.
And I began to do project management for the Director of Public Works, and through that I got to, well, one of the important things that happened was there was a planned development in South Whitehall Township that was adjacent to the place where we get our water from, Shant Springs, which is, depending on whose map you use, it's either in South Whitehall or in Upper Macungie. But in looking at that, I said, well, if they do building here, it's going to adversely affect our water supply. And I began looking for ways to protect our water supply, which led to beginning to make an agreement called the Source Water Protection Plan with the state of Pennsylvania. And all that came out of, I was only asked to review this to see if there was anything, odd about this that we needed to do, and I took the initiative to make sure that we started to protect our water supply. That initiative, as far as I know, is still going on, but at a snail's pace. At some point along this, the Public Works Director left the city's employment and was replaced by an interim director who was the chief engineer, who eventually became the Public Works Director. I was not a fan of that appointment for many reasons, not the least of which was that the mayor had already won a battle of, does the city Public Works Director need to be an engineer? And by going back to the engineer, he was more or less capitulating on something that he had already won. But there were other reasons, just really having to do with vision of where Public Works needs to be and what they need to do. And I made my feelings known to the mayor, and the mayor instead decided that he would remove all of my responsibilities.
Wow. And
he sent me a letter, which I have in writing, telling me to stop all the projects I was working on. I was in the middle of 32 projects, all of them important to the city, and most of them having to do with the environment. I was the guy responsible for Allentown's carbon footprint, for both documenting what it was and figuring out how to lower it. I was in the middle of that project. I was in the middle of a couple different water projects, and lots of things. I was the guy who was trying to make car share come to Allentown. There were 32 projects altogether, all of them good for Allentown,
and they all
got stopped immediately. He had me write up a description of where it was and who the contacts were, hand it to the chief engineer, who is now the Public Works Director, and to the best of my knowledge, none of them have moved substantially forward in the year since I've done that. Wow. Part of the reason for that was I had suggested a course of action which would have saved my department, Public Works and Engineering, about $250,000 a year, which was about 40% of our budget.
Right.
And it was through adding GPS technology and changing how we did business, our business process, and eliminating 2 positions of surveyor because they were basically being replaced by a rod with a push button on it.
Which a lot of the more progressive cities are using.
Yes.
Okay.
Along with the chief surveyor, we brought this to the public works director before he left, and it was going forward. When he left, the new public works director put a stop to it, and it was really out of all of this and the mayor changing my job that my claim for overtime arises.
Okay.
So let me spend a few minutes describing where
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
at.
we definitely need to touch on that because there is a perception in the public right now that you seem to be a disgruntled worker, and that you're just pretty much going in for it due to going into the mayoral candidacy because of the wages for the overtime.